Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Hi, my name is Romanna Dada. I'm a serial entrepreneur, founder of a VC in the region, one of the first VCs actually in the Middle East in 2010, which I founded. And really excited to be here today with Adam, talking to you about extreme entrepreneurship.
So we are here in Marrakesh, Morocco, because there was just the conference,
Yes.
GITEX Africa, a lot of startup founders,
Yes.
a lot of VCs, a lot of investors. And would you like to say what your mandate is these days with your fund?
Absolutely. So we have a couple of entities that I work with. My own entity, which is Fly Forward VC, and that's basically investing in startups in emerging markets. I would argue perhaps extreme entrepreneurship markets, where we help those companies to come into either the Middle East to scale because of the size and scale of the opportunity that we have, and also help them to access the capital they need to do that.
Now, you also work for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, correct?
That's correct, yes. So in my new role, I'm working for what ultimately becomes a part of the Sovereign Wealth Fund's investments, and that is at this particular moment a focus on venture building. So we're looking at identifying great entrepreneurs around the world who may have had successes in their markets to come to the region to help us to build solutions for many of the key problems we have in the region. So for example, many of you will know climate-proof agriculture is a big problem we have in the region, and I'm super passionate about this space. Sorry.
And there's a plane in the background, but it is so much quieter here than it was during the conference trying to record over background ambient noise. So
yeah, I'm impressed you actually got some footage there, because that would have been tough, but it's perfect. It's lovely and quiet. We're in a beautiful Marrakesh style Riyadh, so very blessed.
so to continue, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, so
Yes.
climate tech is a big deal.
Climate tech is a big deal, of course. I mean, look, we're in extreme weather conditions, right? In the region, we live in a place where it is over 35 degrees for over 90% of the year. Being able to grow our own food and develop food security is super important. So actually, I think the statistics are something like 95% of our food is imported still in the region, which is obviously far too much. So climate-proof agriculture, a particular startup that I'm looking at right now, the Food Collective, which I love, actually have developed technology which is called aeroponic technology. So it moves away from hydroponic to aeroponic, which has a much higher ROI just because of the fact it uses much less resource to deliver the same amount of crop effectively. They're actually making strawberries, which I'm actually going to their farm on Friday to go and try, so I can give you a bit of an update post that.
Now, I think there's a third fund that you're very proud of, and this caught our attention in the audience when you presented in your panel. The Female Funders Fund, is that what it's called?
It's called Women Collective. So Women Collective is really based on the thesis that many of you will know, again, the stats are pretty dire in the world. 1% of venture capital globally is only going to women, which is pretty awful as a number. Our thesis is that in order to change that, what we actually need to do is empower more women to become investors. So the decision makers in finance are also only at 11% globally, which is pretty sad. And so the thesis is that there's a lot of gender bias in the decision making, and therefore we need to bring more women to the table to start getting them investing. As many of you probably know, we know that when women are successful, they give much more back to society. Generally, the stats prove that they end up doing much more in charitable giving, supporting their employees, etc. And perhaps that's why the statistics show that women-founded or women-led companies end up actually having longer longevity and also creating higher profitability. So with Women Collective, we're bringing together lots and lots of people to come and invest from as small as $5,000. So anyone can come in and invest in a startup. And we're getting these small tickets together to create minimum $100,000 tickets in startups around the world in markets where we think there's really significant opportunity to get that return. Our focus is really on maximizing returns for our investors and getting that return out as quickly as possible. What's wonderful, and I know you mentioned it earlier, is that we do allow men to come in because we want to supercharge and do as many possible rounds as possible. So if I was to only have women, unfortunately, our network is still not big enough to have enough female investors, but I still want to do more investments because I want those women to perform well, and we need to get to the minimum $100,000. So at the moment, our mandate is around 60 to 70% women, and we allow 30% to be men. But over time, hopefully we'll increase that to 80 to 90% until we're full. And we have, an hour and it's 10 women at $10,000, and that's the ideal scenario.
That's fantastic. We might have to pause, and that's actually great because we're coming up on 5 minutes. We got another jet going overhead.
Okay.
And it's partly to make sure that the camera stays stable. So do you want to pause here and we'll call this part one, the intro to who you are and what you do?
Sounds good.
Or we could wrap up with one more fact.
Yes,
I think we can fit that in.
Let's go one more fact.
Tell us about your background, because if somebody looks up your LinkedIn profile, they'll see that you're fluent in Hindi. You say that you're learning Urdu.
Urdu, that's correct.
Any other languages?
I used to speak Spanish, French fluently. Actually, my big key was that I used to speak 11 languages. Now it's down to like 4 or 5, maybe 6. So I come from a community of people called Memons, and Memons are well known for trading and philanthropy around the world. We're a trading community that have moved effectively every generation, and I've continued that history. Of course, moving back to the Middle East, living between Dubai and Riyadh with my 10-year-old daughter. And so that's me. I also speak enough conversational Arabic to have a conversation.
And so people will wonder if somebody is fluent in Hindi and knows all these other languages. Thank you for already highlighting that community. Is it an ethnic identity? Do you want to
it's a community of people that generally they never married outside, so they stayed fairly close, and they're mostly a trading community that have moved generationally from country to country. I would argue it's not so ethnic because there tend to be Indians, Pakistanis. There are Memons in most parts of the world, but they have generally moved from the Asian subcontinent is the theory.
So South Asian.
South Asian.
Okay. So this makes, let's list all the ways as part of this intro segment that you're an appropriate person to interview for an extreme entrepreneurship channel.
Yes.
First of all, you look for startups, new businesses that have the chance that they might scale significantly.
Yes.
In what used to be called developing markets, do we call it now global south? What's the term you like to use?
For the Middle East, honestly, I feel like they are, well, actually numbers show they're the fastest growing global economy, right? So that's just based on pure stats today. So I no longer think you can call them emerging markets or developing markets. It's the world's fastest growing economy. Okay. Incredible markets where we have a lot of dry powder, we have capital to invest in startups, and we have a market that's growing. It's a thriving population. Over 50% of our population in Saudi Arabia, just as an example, is under the age of 30. And I think it's over 64% is under the age of over 60% is under the age of 30, and over 50% is under the age of 19.
So we were listing all the reasons. So one is that you are investing in economies that are dynamic, let's call them that, where there are profound needs and sometimes extreme conditions.
Exactly.
In the Middle East and North Africa.
Absolutely. And one of the exciting ones I told you about that I met yesterday was HAT, which is a Palestinian startup, interestingly, that I'm really keen to support. So they've done incredibly well, $5 million of revenue, are now based in Morocco, and I'm really excited to see how we can support them, maybe for M&A opportunities, investment from a Middle Eastern arm. It doesn't always mean we have to take them into the Middle East, but maybe there's a Middle East equivalent. For example, we have huge food tech platforms in the Middle East that could look at expanding into other markets through making investments into these startups. And I think that's also an opportunity that we find for extreme entrepreneurs.
Okay, so you invest in markets that even include Palestine, which regardless of somebody's position or what side they feel they're on, we can agree that's an extreme environment.
Yes, I think we can all agree that.
Okay, and so you invest in extreme environments. Some of the entrepreneurs that you look to back are themselves in an extreme situation.
Yes, look, my theory and my thesis is very simple. And you see this globally, right? Where there are perfect conditions, you are almost not forced to innovate, right? But it's where you find conditions are not ideal, you have to hustle much more. It's the old thesis that we also have in entrepreneurship, that when entrepreneurs get funded too much, they tend to lose the idea of hustle, and they tend to become less efficient, capital efficient. Now, as an entrepreneur myself, coming to the VC side, I understand capital efficiency is really the most important part of this. And so when you think about emerging markets and extreme markets, I think extreme entrepreneurship is extreme markets are the perfect place to find those great entrepreneurs. And if you could support them and pull them out of those extreme markets with that extreme market mindset, then you're in a perfect position.
Completely agree. The stories in my first book and the ones I've been collecting for volumes 2 and 3, that's one of the big theses, that these people hustle and outwork anybody that is bored with everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, so maybe that's a good intro, or is there anything else you want to include?
I think that's a good intro.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are concluding this intro segment. And do you want to pronounce your name one more time? It's
Romanna Dada.
Romanna Dada. I was wondering if there was a sort of an extra emphasis because there's 2 N's in
No,
Romana.
actually Romana comes from Roman in Arabic, which is a pomegranate.
And that's one way to remember Romana. Okay.
Exactly. Very nice to have this interview with you. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, enjoying it so far. This is segment one, intro. Next, to tease the second part, why don't we cover lessons you've learned by being a founder yourself, and now what you look for in people that you invest in. You asked me great questions in my authoring project, so I know you know how to ask good questions. I'm wondering, what have you learned the hard way?
Sure.
Maybe that's a teaser for part two.